Hey YouTube, it's Eric. In this video, I'm going to be covering an alliance that was created between William Donovan and Pro Deo, which helped amalgamate the amalgamate the OSS into the Central Intelligence Agency. I found some good information, so I'm going to put it out in this video. Um, I put some links in the description from the material I'm going to be going through. This is the agency here. It's called Pro Deo, and I couldn't find it. You can't like I typed on they don't have a Wikipedia page. There's not a lot of information on them. I think because the system wants to kind of hush down the relationship between the CIA and Pro Deo. But this is from an archive of an American-oriented university in the heart of Europe. Interestingly, we see here Pro Deo University, this was the Pro Deo movement. It was like a Catholic anti-communist movement. They were playing the fascist side of the Hegelian dialectic because the Jesuits created fascism and communism. We see here Pro Deo was established through a vision of its present. This is the Catholic priest that was connected with William Donovan in the OSS. Rector Father Felix A. Morleon, a Belgian priest of the Dominican order. Pro Deo is a lay university. Its educational programs are shaped by, let's see, they are shaped. There's a picture of Felix A. Morleon, Pro Deo's president. Their policies are based on a religious board of trustees and faculties, 151 professors from 11 countries. Its students embrace the Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, and Buddhist faith, and the institute itself receives guidance from an American council made up of Catholics, Protestants, and Jews. I would say mostly Catholics, and they even emphasize the Catholics first. But here's Father Felix A. Morleone. Okay, you see here he had an outstanding record of opposition to all forms of dictatorship. He founded a university following World War II to combat communist exploitation of social unrest and help provide a permanent solution to the post-war crisis. You're gonna see this pamphlet I found is like propaganda. And actually, I'll show you that Henry Luce, the Skull and Bones Catholic who founded the Time magazine. Henry Luce was one of the vice presidents at this Pro Deo, it looks like, for this archive here for an American-oriented university in the heart of Europe. There's a picture of the Father Felix A. Morion. I'm going to read to you from Douglas Waller's book on a biography on William Donovan. I'm going to read to you like Donovan's relationship to this Father A. Morleone. Yeah, I'm just pulling up my chat here. Okay, but this is the book I'm reading to you out of. It's called Wild Bill Donovan by Douglas Waller, the spy master who created the OSS. This is page 250. Okay, you can see here the connection between Donovan and the Pro Deo. Before he left Rome, Donovan paid a visit to the Vatican to huddle with Pope Pius XII. Donovan had devoted a lot of time to cultivating and encouraging spying by the Catholic Church. Vincent is Bill Donovan's brother. Vincent had vetted priests for him who might be useful as agents. The apostolic delegate Cardinal Spellman had introduced to Donovan 3 years earlier dropped by his office, frequently with political reports, papal envoys filled from foreign posts where Donovan had no agents, such as in Tokyo. Actually, I'm going to read to you from a biography on Cardinal Spellman a bit later in the video, just to connect some more dots. Donovan also had another Catholic intelligence network he kept hidden from the apostolic delegate, and all but a few of his trusted advisors. It was known as the quote Pro Deo project, and it was run for him by Father Felix Morleon, whose code name became quote Blackie. Okay, so you see here Donovan was directly involved with this Catholic intelligence network. And here I showed you a picture of the father here, Felix A. Morleon, and here's a picture of him right here. Okay, from the archive of the Pro Deo papers here. Morleon was a Belgian Dominican priest. Vincent Donovan had known who had run a press propaganda service since the 1930s in Breda, Holland, and Brussels, with Catholic correspondents scattered around Europe, feeding him reports that he'd distributed in 2 dozen countries on the continent. The uncensored stories Morleon's correspondents smuggled out of Germany particularly irritated Joseph Goebbels and the Gestapo. Well, Joseph Goebbels was trained by Jesuits and the Borean Fathers in Germany. But when the Germans overran Europe, Morleon relocated his service to Lisbon, Portugal, which in Portugal was ran by a devout Catholic dictator Antonio Salazar, who began to rule Portugal on the motto of papal encyclicals in July 1940 and continued to print his anti-Nazi, anti-communist news stories for what he now called the Pro Deo movement. Again, this is playing on like the pro-Western, pro-fascist side of the Jesuit chessboard. But fearing the Germans would also invade Portugal, Morley once more, this time to New York City in September 1941 with the help of William Donovan and Alan Dulles. He set up the Center of Information Pro Deo and soon had his process rolled in with reports from Europe. But Morley's network of Pro Deo correspondents around Europe also became a private intelligence service for Donovan. I'm going to repeat that, okay? But Father Morleon's network of pro Deo correspondents around Europe also became a private intelligence service for William Donovan. William Donovan, the papal knight of Malta, and he was given a Order of Saint Sylvester in 1944. Also, the DuPont lawyer in the DuPont munitions hearings, and William Donovan was one of the founders of the American Legion, which was a fascist organization, which I covered in my last video. And the American Legion has the Roman reef right in their logo. And the American Legion put pinned medals on Mussolini and Francisco Franco, two Catholic dictators, Mussolini in 1935, Franco in 1951. Oh, hey, bro, Gopher. I don't want to get too off topic with the shape of the Earth in this video, but I view it like more philosophically. The Earth makes more sense to me being concave because the entire like cellular structure of our bodies, like all the cells are concave in our bodies. Um, Many like natural phenomena uh, in nature, most fruit grows as concave in shape. Concave rocks. Even like the glands in the body are concave. But I'd say mostly I think the Earth is concave rather than flat because of the cellular structure of a human body. Okay, but you see here by 1944 he was secretly, and this is Donovan. Donovan was secretly paying Blackie, and Blackie was the code name for Dominican Father Montemon, almost $2,000 a month to help maintain his Morlean, help his New York office as well as bureaus overseas. In return, Morlean funneled Donovan cables his European correspondence, filed which became known as the Black Reports. Okay. So the Jesuits wear black robes. Okay, the men in black. Many of the files, which were written by reporters instead of trained spies, were too general or opinionated, or had too many errors to be of any use. But other black reports contained intelligence Donovan's analysts deemed valuable on the mood and thinking of Catholics in Germany and other countries. One file analyzed, quote, fate of the Catholic Church in Russia, end quote. And you see that that's significant. Keep that in mind. Quote, uh, one of the Pro Deo files was called Fate of the Catholic Church in Russia. Another, which Donovan relayed to Roosevelt, gauged, quote, German Catholic resistance to the Nazis. End quote. Pro Deo, one classified OSS memo concluded, quote, is one of the few sources from which an approximation may be made of what the common man and woman are thinking, end quote. That's from the OSS. So according to the OSS, this pro extreme like Catholic propaganda agency Pro Deo is made up of what the common man and woman are thinking. Interesting. You see, Donovan ordered that the black reports be sent to him, and only to a select few in his organization, not because the information in them was so secret, but because of the danger Father Morlean's correspondence faced if it became known that they were working for an American intelligence service. The reporters, who were given code names like, quote, Hank Judah, were never told their cables also ended up in the hands of the OSS. Donovan soon had bigger plans for Morlean. Within 4 months, he would have Blackie planted in the Holy See and feeding him Vatican gossip on the man whose private chamber he now sat, Pope Pius XII, Eugenio Pacelli. This is the same Pope Pius XII who said that before he became Pope, Pope Pius X appeared to him in a vision and told him that like he would be selected pontiff. And the same Pope Pius XII saw the sun zigzag for 3 consecutive days in 1951. He's the only one in the world who saw it because he's the vicar of Christ. All the other astronomers and scientists and sun gazers on the earth didn't see anything happen with the sun on that day. But Pope Pius XII saw the sun zigzag, and Pope Pius XII is also apparently like he saw Jesus Christ in person many times apparently, and he saw the Virgin Mary in person many times. Okay, but continuing, Pius had been one of the war's most cunning fence straddlers. The Allies see that his silence over German atrocities and his willingness to have a Japanese embassy at the Vatican. A racist, the pontiff asked the Allies not to have black soldiers posted in Rome. Interesting there. Um, Usually the Allies ignored the request when they entered the city. After Axis soldiers were expelled from the North Africa in May 1943, Hans Staffengel, that's one of Donovan's associates, German-born, American-born, like second-generation German, reported to Donovan that Pius felt the wind shift and became more critical of fascism and National Socialism in his speeches, which Puzzi knew would irritate Hitler. Donovan also knew that Pius so far had refused to authorized priests to serve as chaplains. With the northern Italian partisans, the Pope thought the bands were infested with anti-clerical communists and discounted their strength. He reversed himself later in 1944 when he realized the guerrillas had clout. Um, I think that's kind of. Here, I'll finish this little bit here for you, just so you get more of the context. Um, but William Donovan told his friends he liked Pius, quote, immensely as a person, end quote. William Donovan is devout Roman Catholic. He was going to enter the priesthood. Donovan did not mind Tokyo having a delegation in the Vatican as long as the pontiff's emissaries continued to feed him tidbits on what they'd picked up from the Japanese ambassador Ken Harada and his underlings. Um, but after the two men settled into their charge and the Pope's aides had left the room, Donovan told Pius that espionage agents hidden in Harada's diplomatic mission soon planned to install a radio transmitter in their office to beam intelligence back to Japan. Pius promised to shut it down. The Pope and the spy master chatted about American politics. Pius let Donovan know that he was pulling for Roosevelt's re-election. He would let Donovan. He told Donovan to send FDR, quote, all my heart's affections, end quote. Donovan said he would. The Catholic Church had become a trusted and valuable ally in his secret war against the Nazis. And again, like Donovan was working hand in hand with the Nazis and the Catholic Church, and that's why Operation Paperclip happened. That gave like high-level Nazis Reinhard Gehlen an American citizenship, and Reinhard Gehlen actually began working with the CIA in West Germany. A source for that is the book The Chairman, the biography on John J. McCloy. It's called The Chairman: The Makings of the American Establishment. Okay. And yeah, that's why the CIA's head office came into the IG Farben building. Okay, but you see, there's some of the connections with Pro Deo. And actually, I'm gonna pull up the picture again here of Father Morlian. Yeah, actually, I'm just seeing your comment here. Yeah, the globe baller did start with metaphysical reasons, but that's where Newton's gravity like falls apart because gravity is a metaphysical principle. Like it's not meant to be interpreted physically. Like all Newton did was he took Kepler's working laws of motion. The Kepler his laws are actually pretty accurate on how like the planets move, but he took Kepler's laws of motion and just added mass. And mass is obviously like it's a in the world of forms, but there's no need to add mass to Kepler's third law, and that's what Newton did. And actually, I don't know if you've read this book, Pro Gopher. I recommend it. You can find it free on Google. It kind of woke me up to how gravity was a lie. It's called The Influence of the Blue Ray of the Sunlight by General Augustus Pleasonton. It was written in 1865, and he proves that like gravity is actually magnetism, magnetism and electricity. And he proves that like all the atmospherical phenomena is positive and negative electricity. Um, engaging with each other, and like that's what causes heat and like the friction between the two electricities. It's a really good book. Okay, so I'm gonna go to I'm quoting out from Aber Manhattan's Murder in the Vatican. Okay, so this goes into a bit of the Pro Deo. This is the head of Pro Deo, Felix Morian. The, the Vatican-Washington alliance had been formalized by veritable political marriage only shortly before. In 1984, in fact, President Reagan bypassed the USA Constitution and granted special ambassadorial status to the Vatican. President Ronald Reagan also was the first U.S. president ever sworn in facing the Roman obelisk. The operation had been conducted by secret negotiation between the president and the Pope. The sudden announcement took America by surprise. At one stroke, the USA had placed the Catholic Church above all other Christian denominations throughout the USA, putting the Vatican on par with the USA. Uh, the U, putting the Vatican on par with the USA and the Pope on par with the USA president. The result of such a USA Vatican parity process had been the culmination of decades of secretive operations within the inner wheel of the American administration itself. During World War II in 1944, for instance, Pope Pius XII decorated General William Donovan with the Grand Cross of the Order of St. Sylvester, a reward given only to 100 other men, quote, who by outstanding deed championed the church, end quote. The significance of the reward was in the fact that Donovan had served as the chief of the Office of Strategic Services, the wartime predecessor of the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA. Early in the war in 1941, Donovan had already forged an alliance with the founder of a Catholic intelligence agency called Pro Deo. And you see this right here. This is the founder of Pro Deo on the screen, Dominican Father Felix A. Morleon. Okay, the two agencies collaborated during and after the war, and Henry Luce was involved in Pro Deo, the uh, founder of Time Magazine, Skull and Bones. Two agencies collaborated during and after the war to such an extent that they eventually amalgamated. And I read to you earlier from quoting Douglas Waller's book how Donovan essentially, like the operations of Pro Deo, like were privately run by William Donovan. Okay. The two agencies collaborated, and after the war, to such an extent they eventually amalgamated. This resulted in the de facto integration of the CIA and the Vatican intelligence into a global USA Vatican apparatus whose operations now encompass the globe. The amalgamation operated in favor of the advancement of the Catholic Church in the political fields at home and abroad, and indeed the USA Vatican promotion of their respective objectives. It helped the promotion of presidential candidates in the USA and the promotion of potential papal candidates in the Vatican. And that's why Pope John Paul I was taken out, because he was going to start investigating the Vatican banking mafia operation that was run by the Michel Sindona, Jesuit educated at Messina, the P2 Freemasonry, and the CIA. Yeah. You see here the Vatican's CIA spying operation had assessed both presidents and popes during the past 3 decades and acted accordingly. For instance, they considered Pope John the 23rd politically naive, as Pope Paul VI dangerous, and Pope John Paul I a costly mistake. Well, interesting. Pope Paul VI was actually working for the OSS during World War II, and I've linked the source for that in the description. Yeah. Um, You see, the secretive USA collaboration, furthermore, had been made possible by the fact that prominent officials of the USA government were also prominent Catholics who integrated the interests of the USA with those of the Catholic Church, vice versa. This process was culminated in the first and second terms of the Reagan administration. Okay, and I made a video titled Catholic Appointments in Ronald Reagan's Administration, but Aber Manhattan lists some of them here. To mention only a few in key posts: George Shultz, Secretary of State; Donald Reagan, Chief of Staff to the White House; Robert McFarlane, National Security Advisor; and William Casey, who was a Knight of Malta, Jesuit educated at Fordham, Director of the CIA, and William Casey, the second most powerful man only to the President himself. Casey would actually fly to the Vatican in the private windowless C-141 jet frequently. He'd go underground to the Vatican. Okay. So you see there, you see Aber Manhattan. He wrote a bit how the CIA merged with Pro Deo. Yeah. And I'm gonna show you the book. I'm gonna quote to you from the American Pope. No, it's not. I'm not saying you need magnetism for gravity. I'm saying magnetism explains like the phenomena of gravity, like why objects fall to the ground. I'm saying like gravity was like there's no gravity is like a fallacious explanation for like electromagnetism. That's what I'm saying. So I'm gonna quote to you here from the American Pope, Francis Spellman. Okay, this is page 143. I mean, this is some interesting information. Just that to me shows that like the Vatican was controlling both the USA and Moscow, the Soviet Union. Like Jesuit Father Edmund Walsh was in the Soviet Union. Okay. And actually, you knew it. In this book here, you can get this book that I quoted from earlier, Douglas Waller, Wild Bill Donovan, the spy master who created the OSS, for free off of LibGen. And actually, there's some pictures, some good pictures at the end of the book. So here's a picture of what Bill Donovan with Francis Spellman. Here's Francis Cardinal Spellman, an old friend, pins the Order of Saint Sylvester on Donovan after the war. Donovan enlisted the Catholic Church and its emissaries overseas to feed him intelligence in places his OSS agents could not penetrate. Donovan also thought he had a prized source within the Vatican, that being Cardinal Spellman, who slipped him purported transcripts of papal conversations, but the man turned out to be a fabricator. U.S. and this is from the U.S. Army Military Institute. Well, Cardinal Spellman uh, completely initiated the Vietnam War. Cardinal Spellman was actually the vicar of the American Armed Forces officially, and some really good information on Cardinal Spellman. There's some information in this book here actually. I'll show you a picture of Cardinal Spellman with Ngo Diem, the dictator of Vietnam. Um, Cardinal Spellman, the Vietnam War was actually known as like Spelly's War. Okay. That's a good picture. I think we'll leave up for now. But this is quoting from the American Pope, page 143. Okay. According to OSS informants, again, William Donovan, like the OSS was like the wartime predecessor to the CIA. The OSS began to merge with this, or it did merge with this Catholic Pro Deo movement. Okay, but according to OSS informants, Spellman met with the Pope, being Pius XII, several monsignors, Myron Taylor, the papal knight who was FDR's personal representative to Pope Pius XII, the chairman of the United States Steel Corporation, and Father Zaki Maker. Zaki Maker was the American assistant to the office of the Jesuit general. And I couldn't find anything on this Father Zaki Maker on the internet. I probably you have to go off the Jesuit controlled Google search engine to do that. Okay, but Zaki Maker was the American assistant to the office of the Jesuit general to discuss the extremely complex business. Their topics ranged from Russia's establishing religion in countries. You see here, the Jesuits are interested in Russia, okay, because they controlled Soviet Russia. It was an experiment as like a Bolshevik reduction. Joseph Stalin was educated at the Jesuit Tiflis Seminary. Okay, but their topics ranged from Russia's reestablishing religion in countries. It would liberate the Soviet role in ending the war in the Pacific. There appeared little doubt that Moscow was anxious to build bridges to the church. In 1944, then check this out here. In 1944, an unknown Polish-American priest, Stanislav Orlemansky of Springfield, Massachusetts, had suddenly come to international attention to the dismay of Spellman and other churchmen. Orlemansky, who had organized, and the only reason he did so because Cardinal Spellman was playing the one side of the dialectic super hard. He was playing the fascist, anti-communist side of the dialectic. Okay. You see here, Orlemansky, who had organized a pro-Soviet League of Poles in the United States, he had a Catholic bishop organizing a pro-Soviet League of Poles, was invited to Moscow by none other than the Jesuit-educated Joseph Stalin himself. The priest accepted the offer in Moscow and spoke twice with Stalin, who indicated a desire for increased contact with Rome and expressed a commitment to religious freedom. Okay, and actually, there's some good information in Aver Manhattan's book, The Vatican, Moscow, Washington Alliance, about Joseph Stalin's contact with Rome. Okay, you see here, when Stanislav Orlemansky, Catholic priest, returned home, he gave a statement to the press in which he said Stalin was sincere. And again, you see here, Spellman was furious, and Spellman was only furious because like it's kind of a blow to the cover of the Catholic Church because if you know that Stalin was educated by Jesuits, you just see like you see here the Catholic Church is controlling both sides of the Hegelian dialectic like like masterfully. Okay, that's why Spellman was mad because he's playing the strict anti-communist, pro corporations, pro fascism, rigid Catholicism side of the dialectic. Okay. So Spellman was furious in the wake of the publicity the incident received, again because it's bad publicity. The native priest he believed might have jeopardized the work and he and others were doing secretly. He wanted Orlemansky silenced. Suddenly the priest found himself denounced as a quote stooge by the church officials who dismissed his mission as quote burlesque. At first, Orlomensky was bitterly angry, but he later recanted. The priest wasn't heard from again. He was banished to a monastery. So they banished this priest to a monastery for spilling the beans on the Catholic Church relationship with Stalin. And I found this is from the New England Historical Society. You can find a picture of them actually together. But you see here, Orlemansky's meeting with Stalin was uneventful. The priest spoke bluntly about his concerns and criticisms, but Stalin discussed the situation persuasively. He encouraged Orlemansky to visit the Polish soldiers he had aided afar with the Polish citizens. Orlemansky was pleased with what he discovered. In contrast to Nazi persecution and the worst fears that Polish Americans had, listen to this, he found that Roman Catholics were reasonably well treated by Russia. Yeah. So, and you can, I linked this in the description. Here's a picture of Orlemansky on the right, and there's Stalin. Okay, but yeah, this is from the American New England Historical Society. Oh yeah, I'm aware of Aber. Was yeah, I knew he was born into an aristocratic family in Italy, and actually I don't know if you know this program. Aber was given that knighthood because he was working for an organization called Radio Free Europe, and Radio Free Europe I found was actually founded up by C.D. Jackson, who was working as a psychological warfare expert in the Eisenhower and Truman administrations. And C.D. Jackson, who founded that Radio Free Europe, that's what Abermanhattan was working at Radio Free Europe before he started exposing the Vatican. But C.D. Jackson met with Jesuit Joseph Rettinger in 1952, and the source for that is the book *The Chairman* by Kai Bird, the biography on John J. McCloy. But yeah, Abermanhattan. Historically, I've read many history books on the Vatican, and Abermanhattan's information is solid. Um, I think the only well, I haven't done enough research into it to fully say definitively that nuclear weapons do not exist. But Abermanhattan uh, did he exposes masterfully how the big business and the Catholic Church controlled nuclear energy. But Abermanhattan just doesn't say that nuclear energy doesn't exist. So I think um, that's the only thing I can think of right now that you could possibly say that Abermanhattan is disinfo for. But okay, but continuing. Here's a Pinterest. I'm gonna see if I can find another picture here of Donovan. Here's Donovan inspecting an OSS propaganda office overseas. Yeah. So, according to the so-called Vessel papers, OSS reports from Vatican informants, the major stumbling block to a Vatican-Moscow accord was Poland. Vatican was alarmed at the prospect of a Moscow-linked government in Poland, a nation where the Church historically exerted great influence. Throughout the war, the Vatican has supported the exiled Polish government in London. The accuracy of the vessel documents had become suspect because of the nature of the strange band of spies. Priests, journalists, and others who had been recruited by James Angleton. I'm going to show you some more information on James J. Angleton in this video. He was a Knight of Malta working for the CIA. And James J. Angleton was the Rome station chief for the OSS and later head of the counterintelligence for the organization's successor, the CIA. One of Angleton's spies was identified as Monsignor Enrico Pucci, the Vatican's press aide who furnished daily briefings to foreign correspondents and moonlighted as an OSS informant. Okay, so the name of that informant is Monsignor Enrico Pucci, Pucci. Okay, during the war, he apparently sold reports to the Axis. The most bizarre of James J. Angleton's operatives was Virgilio Scrintoni, a former writer of pornography who was characterized in an OSS background paper as, quote, unscrupulously mercenary and has no evidence of political affiliation. It is an opportunist in today's states that he always was an anti-fascist, end quote. It was believed he had also sold information to the Nazis and the Japanese. Nonetheless, he was well connected at the Vatican. Okay, so actually, I'll pull up. I'll wait till I pull up other information. I'm gonna just pull up a picture of Angleton. But the Vessel papers, however, indicated that what was generally known to be the case anyway, the prospects for a civilized Vatican-Moscow relationship were never good. Okay, both the Pope and Spellman were rabidly anti-communist, but this author doesn't make the connection that the Vatican like played both sides. The Vatican, and actually, Albert Manhattan explains this great how the Vatican a benefit of the Bolshevik Revolution was the weakening of the Orthodox Church and the weakening of the economic system that was controlled by like the Tsars of Russia, and the church was very controlled. The Orthodox Church very much controlled the economic situation. So the Bolsheviks completely going separation of church and state was a great move or a great opportunity for American corporations to come into Russia, and that's exactly what the Skull and Bonesman Avril Harriman did by setting up the Ruscom Bank in Soviet Russia in 1921. And actually, in this book here, uh, by Douglas Waller, Avril Harriman met with William Donovan many times. It's quoted in the book. Um, let's see here. Yeah, Donovan was very close with General Mark Clark. And General Mark Clark was going to be the first proposed Vatican ambassador or American ambassador to the Vatican. Here's a picture of them together. William Donovan joined the 5th Army commander, General Mark Clark, in his patrol boat for one of the Italian landings. Mark Clark found the OSS valuable for his operations. Yeah. Let me see here. Where was I at here? And actually, and going here in Aber Manhattan, actually in his book, the Vatican, Moscow, Washington alliance exposes really well how the Jesuits and the Catholic Church, is under the popes of John the 23rd and Pope Paul the Sixth. That's when the Vatican II Council, the ecumenical movement, was called. But he really exposes well how the Catholic Church began to mix Marxism with Catholicism. And actually, an official motto of the Catholic Church was in Latin. It was "Where Lenin is Jerusalem." Yeah. And let me see here. Okay, but you see, the Vatican's impetus. This is back to the American Pope. The Vatican's impetus for seeking any possible accommodation was to gain rights for the Church in Russia. And actually, in that Aber Manhattan book quoted earlier, you'll see that there's a vision of Fatima that occurred in Portugal to Catholic nuns, and the vision of Fatima was none other than to concentrate Russia to the Catholic Church. Yeah. Um, so the Vatican's impetus for seeking any possible accommodation was to gain rights for the Church in Russia and a practical recognition of the importance of the Soviet Union in world affairs, which the Holy See dreaded seeing happening. Thus, both the Archbishop and the Pope were dismayed, believing too many concessions were being made to Russia by the West and at the Yalta Conference in February 1945. Lots of information about Donovan being president at the Yalta Conference in this book. Their fears were borne out. Roosevelt and Churchill traveled to the Soviet Union rather than to meet with Jesuit-educated Stalin on neutral ground or make him come to them. The outcome seemed inevitable. The Soviets got what they wanted, including Catholic Poland. Spellman, and again, the Soviets were controlled by the Jesuits. Spellman knew that Roosevelt, though he could check Stalin with personal diplomacy, um, or Spellman knew that Roosevelt thought he could check Stalin with personal diplomacy. The Archbishop thought the president was being naive, well aware of the Vatican's fears. Roosevelt sent Democratic leader Ed Flynn first to Moscow and then to the Vatican in an effort to salvage something from the attempts to bring the powers together, but the mission was doomed. And another Ed Flynn was another private diplomat that Roosevelt sent on top of Myron C. Taylor, Papal Knight, and GM executive James Mooney, who was given a German Order of the Eagle Medal from Hitler. But Flynn spent a month in Russia but was forced to cut short of his time in Rome. The reason was disheartening. Franklin Roosevelt, the man who thought he could checkmate Stalin, died April 12, 1945. Spellman recognized the end of an era. With Roosevelt dead, he had no illusions about making peace with the Church's ideological enemy. Pacelli had never liked the idea of being flexible with the Russians. The prevailing attitude at the Vatican was summarized in an OSS report of November 1945, 6 months after Roosevelt's death and 3 months after the end of communism in World War II. The Vatican was now girding for battle with communism. Peace was out of the question. This is interesting here. This is the Jesuits are mentioned. The report stated that the Pope had entrusted the Jesuit General de Boyne with determining the level of Soviet aid being given to Italian communists. It was obvious that the Russians were no longer trying to appease Washington by courting Rome. Celli recognized that communism was on the march and that his beloved Italy was a target. And Pacelli was just playing the chessboard the whole World War II, and his Jesuit general Lidichowski. He was determined to thwart communism wherever he could, and as the OSS reported, Du Bois was ready to deploy, quote, intelligent and well trained Jesuits who can travel through Italy without arousing any particular suspicion in an attempt to come into possession of documentary proof of orders given by financial aid furnished by the Soviet Union to Italian communists. Father Du Bois says that he has priests capable of his work and who have specialized for years in the bitter struggle against communism, who have perfect and who have a perfect knowledge of the Russian language. That's Jesuit Father Du Bois saying this. Okay. Thus, the Church embarked on a new crusade that affected the world. The Vatican became the first power to declare the Cold War on the Soviet Union, because the Cold War was controlled at Rome and Georgetown University. Okay. And Spellman played a key role in the power struggle. He was entrusted with getting the United States to provide the cold steel needed to back up the Church's moral fervor. For this part, Spellman needed no encouragement. As the American Church's political leader, he sought vengeance. Actually, and here's interestingly, William Donovan actually went to the same school as FDR at Columbia. They were classmates. And William Donovan actually wanted to be the first Catholic president in the U.S. But Al Smith defeated him in his governor elections in 1928. Um, let's see here. There was another picture. Okay, there's William Donovan here. Okay. Donovan is right here, it looks like, and there's FDR. Okay. Um, So, as the American Church's political leader, Cardinal Spellman sought vengeance on the enemy of both Catholicism and the burgeoning American empire. In doing so, he welded his church and nation to the global obliterating communism. And again, that was just one part of the Jesuit Hegelian dialectic. A good photo, actually. Give me a second. I have this book here somewhere. Uh, I just want to show you this picture. You know, I'm gonna pull it up on the internet. Okay. Give me a second. Because this is just a good kind of way to visualize how the Jesuits controlled communism and fascism. Okay. Give me a second. Apologize for the wait. Here's the photo here. This photo is in a book I have. Oh, it's not. Yeah, my proxy servers are messed up. I'm gonna try to find this book. If I can't find this book in 1 minute, I'm just gonna say fuck it. But this is the source here. This picture is in the, and you can click on this link here on the. Oh, I'm getting a phone call. You can click on this link here in this blog post I made. Here, give me a second. You know, I can't find it right now. But yeah, I'll just go to this link here. This article is titled "Sir Francis Bacon was Johann Valentine Andreae on a pseudonym." Click on this picture. I'd show it to you, but my VPN server is being glitchy right now. In his view, one side of the Kabbalistic pillar is fascism, the other is communism, and the Jesuit IHS is on the top. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's all for this one. That's all the information I think I can. Actually, there's one more link here I wanted to show you, and it was right here. Okay. So this was the executive order that dissolved the OSS. Oh, okay. So it was Executive Order 961 on the 20th of September, dissolved the OSS, and that is October 1945, sending the RNA to the Department of State and everything else to the War Department. Fortunately, Assistant Secretary of War John J. McCloy, who met with Jesuit Joseph Rettinger in 1954, John J. McCloy, who worked for the World Bank, was the chairman of the Council of Foreign Relations, was a lawyer for I.G. Farben, was the Allied High Commissioner in West Germany, and he actually moved into the I.G. Farben building. John J. McCloy was a big power player. John J. McCloy, very tellingly, in a New York Times article you can read, said that he had a Catholic attitude on things, and said that he was a dictator, or he had the powers of a dictator in West Germany. John J. McCloy had saved the SI and X2 branches as the nucleus of a peacetime intelligence service. Within 2 years, the President and the Congress found a new home for the personnel and assets saved in the SSU under Colonel William W. Quinn. Interestingly here about Colonel William Quinn, see here, he United States Army officer who served in intelligence during World War II. Okay. Who served in Korea as well, which was a Jesuit-controlled crusade. Um, you see here, look, interestingly, William Wilson Quinn, I think more proof that Russia was controlled by the intelligence agencies, was given it a Russian Intelligence Award here, the Order of St. George. Okay? And it's a Order of St. George. It has the Vatican Maltese cross on it. Okay, established in 1769. Okay. I read in a interestingly, in a Manly P. Hall book of all places for this fact. It was called Old Testament Wisdom, and after the Bolshevik Revolution, one of the only copies of the Codex Vaticanus, or one of the that Codex, one of the I have that book right here. I think this is just another fact that proved that the Vatican was behind the strings of the Bolshevik Revolution. Let me find that quote here. Give me a second. Uh, let's see here. I don't do this with a script. Pardon me. Yeah, it was the name of the book was the Codex Sinaiticus. It's one of the original Bible publications. Um, yeah, I just want to find this quote here. How can I find this? Jeez. I apologize. Okay, here. So, okay, this is from page 16 of Old Testament Wisdom. After the Russian Revolution, the Codex Sinaiticus was acquired by the British Museum. Actually, Karl Marx was at the British Museum. Jesuit-educated Karl Marx when he was, and I think according to Alberto Rivera, Karl Marx was actually like tutored by like the Jesuits at the British Museum and like the art of communism. After the Russian Revolution, the Codex Sinaiticus was acquired by the British Museum from the Russian government, part of the necessary funds raised by popular subscription. Okay. Um, and then you just continue here. As to the Codex Alexandrinus, it is also very defective. Its origin unknown, but is believed to date from the 5th or 6th century. You see here the British or the Codex Sinaiticus after the Jesuit-controlled Russian Revolution, Bolshevik Revolution, uh, that which had like Skull and Bones, like Avril Harriman, established the commercial connections to like Wall Street and like the British banks, etc. The Bolsheviks sent the Codex Sinaiticus to the British Museum. And that's why I wanted to highlight. But like the big connection in this video is the Pro Deo to the CIA connection, and this is the father here, Felix A. Morlean, who is very intimate with William Donovan. And William Donovan like took over the Pro Deo operations while he was working for the OSS. Okay. James, I'm checking the comments now. If James Florley WordPress, yeah, I'll check that out. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, guys. But yeah, that's all for this one. Peace out, none mass.